Hey everybody, how's it going? We're back here today on my podcast talking about Wes Craven's New Nightmare, the seventh entry, I think. Yes, the seventh entry in the A Nightmare on Elm Street film series. As you guys know, I've been watching all of these for the first time, which is pretty cool. If you're here for the first time, wanting to just check this one out, I said I never got a chance to watch these movies, which is pretty insane, and I have, I guess, finished the series, so to speak. I guess technically there's a couple more. What else is there? There's Freddy versus Jason. I guess you could count that, but I've seen that quite a number of times. And there's also the Freddy's Nightmares TV series. I guess if you want to count that, I haven't checked that out. I kind of want to. I know it has some really bad stuff in there, but there's some cool things. And then the remake, which I've seen as well. Kind of. I kind of saw that some years ago, and I had it on in the background. I wasn't really paying attention, but I do remember it was pretty terrible. Don't know if I'm gonna review those. I'll get to them probably eventually, but not this Halloween season. So I'm glad I got to finally do this whole series this Halloween season. That was kind of my goal. I guess I think I originally said my goal was to do all of the classic series, the three big ones that I consider the big ones. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and Halloween. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen, but we'll keep this going. Like I said, I'm really enjoying doing this. It seems like I'm doing it maybe once or twice a week, and that's seems like a good amount. Some people are watching it, and that's great. I'm glad to see that. Some people are leaving comments, which you guys know I love when you leave comments, and it's cool to hear your thoughts and everything. Um, so I guess some housekeeping stuff before I start talking about this one. Um, let's see, what did I want to talk about? Well, first off, The Witches came out, the remake. I did watch that, and to be honest, I don't know if I'm going to do a podcast episode on it because it was so bad. I mean, New Nightmare or not New Nightmare, Freddy's Dead was way worse. And if we're talking about qualities of movies, that was way worse of a film. But I still did an episode on that. I guess I kind of have to because it's part of this series. But that was just so like painstakingly terrible. I don't know if I want to do an episode on it. I mean, you guys let me know if you think that'd be fun. I'll have to watch it again because I mean, I know this sounds bad. Like I was barely paying attention, and like, how can you say it's bad if you're barely paying attention? That was being generous. I was giving that film the most generous amount of my attention as I possibly could. It was bad, man. And now I've seen a lot of people that like it. Lots of people enjoyed it, and I would suspect, although I guess I don't want to assume, but I would suspect that those people are um, people who have probably never seen the original. That's my guess. I know I have seen people that saw the original and said they liked this one more. I have no idea, man. But yeah, I've seen a decent amount of people say that they liked it. I think overall most people didn't like it, but it's pretty crazy to me. If we're gonna do a little tangent on that, like it was not only just a bad remake, it was a bad adaptation, I think. It was a bad movie in general. I mean, it encapsulated, I mean, it was everything I thought it was going to be. There were no surprises, and it wasn't like, I did this little video where I talked about my thoughts on the trailer, and I kept saying over and over, well, I'll have to reserve judgment. I'll have to reserve judgment, which is true. Sometimes movies do surprise you, but like judging on that trailer that I saw, I was like, I don't know how they can fix all this stuff. It looks like really bad CGI, a lack of practical effects, a very goofy, child-friendly sort of atmosphere. I don't possibly see how they'll rectify those things in the movie. I just don't see how that's even possible. I think this is just the way the movie is going to be. And of course, that's what it was. Horrible CGI. A total reliance on CGI. That's a problem with movies these days too, is they just go so overboard. Every single thing in the movie is CGI. Anything. There's like no effect work done there. It's just always all CGI, and it looked especially bad in this movie. I think, of course, I'm a little bit biased, but I mean, it looked awful, and it was just so extreme. I don't know. I just did not. I thought it was terrible. I mean, it makes sense that a lot of people liked it because, like I was saying, it's just encapsulates everything I don't like about movies now. It's a total Hollywood movie. It's a total moneymaker movie. It's these kinds of movies where I kind of joke with myself because I'm so funny. I always am like, I call them oh geez, what do I even? I'm blanking out because I'm talking to people now. Money laundering movies. That's what I call them. Because I'm like, it's so bad and it's so devoid of substance. I'm like, this has to be part of like a money laundering scheme or something like that. Like this had to have been made for something like that. I mean, obviously, that's not true, but that's kind of what I call them, money laundering movies. Because I'm like, it's just made for the masses to the extremes. I mean, everything is carefully. And don't like people are like, oh, they didn't understand the source material. I saw a lot of people say that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure everyone fully understood the source material and fully understood the original and was very well aware of it. And the book and Roald Dahl and how he made movies and what his thoughts were and things like that. I'm sure they were well aware of that. I'm sure this movie was just very, very carefully crafted by a lot of people to make a certain amount of money and portray itself to a certain demographic of people, which seems to be families and kids. So in that aspect, it might succeed very well, but that don't mean that I don't think it's... Wow, that was a lot of double negatives. That doesn't mean that I don't think it's a piece of garbage. So, yeah, that was terrible, 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 very disappointing. I didn't like basically anything about it. And I don't like Anne Hathaway. I've talked about that before. I know a lot of people do like her, and I just don't like her. I don't have a reason why. There's a lot of actors that I don't like, and I have no clear reason why, because I don't think she's a terrible actor. But I just don't know. There's something weird about her, like her charisma or something. There's a couple other actors, like I've said, I have that I'm like, I don't understand why I dislike them so much, but I just do. So I was not looking forward to seeing her as the Grand High Witch, and they didn't do anything with her face. That was the big thing. Like I'm like thinking like this movie hinges on you having a badass design for the Grand High Witch, because Jim Henson, the man himself, and his team, his company, worked on the original 1990 film. They did amazing puppetry with the mice and everything. And yeah, it looks a little dated and it looks a little goofy, but that's kind of the style. That's part of the charm, right? You know? But I mean, he did Labyrinth too, and like, yeah, it's just that style. CGI and stuff, and amazing effects on the Grand High Witch's face. So I'm like, you gotta have a banger face for this woman, right? I mean, if to put it like that, I guess. And they didn't even try. And when I say they didn't even try, they didn't even do anything. They did nothing for her face. I mean, I was really like, I was talking to my friend who saw it as well, and he was like, kind of, what you see in the trailer is what you get. There's no big reveal. What you see of her face in the trailer, they all have that weird Joker scar thing, so their mouth opens up a little bit, and you get some CGI teeth and a snake forked tongue or whatever. That's it. That's all you get. That's what they went with. Family friendly, not too scary. Don't want to scare too many kids. Yeah, what a piece of shit. Just fuck this movie. Yeah, terrible. I don't know. Why did they made them look like lizards or something? Like their hands, when they took their gloves off, they had they had 3 fingers like claws. It looked like lizards or something. It was weird, and it was all CGI, and it looked terrible too. The only thing that I liked, that I gave a little credit to, was the fact that, in the book, when they take their shoes off, they have square feet. They don't have toes or anything. It's just a square kind of rounded thing, and they have to shove their feet into these, uncomfortable heels and stuff to assimilate. And they did that, so I thought that was cool, because I don't think they did that in the original, and that was the one thing I was always kind of hoping that they would rectify at some point in time. But then the Grand High Witch had like a claw toe or something weird. Yeah, no purple eyes, no ink for their spit or anything like that. The purple eyes they did do, I think, in the original, or they did like some crazy eyes, but I don't think they did that in this one. And I couldn't get over Anne Hathaway's accent, man. It was all over the place. I get it was supposed to be ultra campy, which is cool to an extent, but it was like changing constantly. It was, I don't know. The very least I could say is she had clearly was having fun. I didn't like her performance. I didn't like that portrayal at all, but it seems like she was having fun, and I gotta, I sometimes give some credit there because I I like when I can tell that actors are having fun. So that's cool at least. But yeah, no thanks, no thank you. I'm gonna forget that existed. I didn't realize I didn't had no clue I was going to do a little review on that because I just said at the beginning I wasn't going to talk about it, but then here we are, 10 minutes in. That's it. That's all I ever want to say about that. The end. All right, on to New Nightmare, a much better movie. Oh no, I'm not done yet. Sorry, I have a couple more things to say. What else was I going to say? They are remaking The Exorcist. I saw that, so that's great, awesome. That's going to be terrible. Really appropriate to remake one of the most classic horror movies of all time. I saw that. It's supposed to come out next year, but who knows? Everything in the world is coming out next year because everything's delayed. Who knows? Not really looking forward to that. I watched. Oops, sorry about that. I watched not Nightmare on Elm Street. Friday the 13th Part 2 the other day with my buddy. He's got the new Blu-ray set. I'm sure some of you guys probably have seen that. I think it's Scream Factory. I think so, yeah. And that is pretty good. The transfers are good. That's one of my favorites. I've always really liked the second Friday the 13th because you actually get Jason, but I like the portrayal of Jason where he's not some zombie kind of thing. Don't get me wrong, I like those movies too, but I like this hillbilly version of Jason where he's just like a creepy guy living out in the woods with the shack and he's got the traps and everything. There's like none of those movies really have much of a plot to speak of, but that one's fun. I like that one. It's a good Halloween movie. Yeah, and I mean it's that one's always cool to me because we don't see Jason as that now, but that was the audience's first interaction with him really for the most part as a character. So that's kind of what they just thought Jason was like at the time. And then obviously not until the next movie, about halfway through, does he actually get the mask and become the Jason we know. Yeah, so that one was good. So anyways, let's actually do New Nightmare. So this one, as you know, as most people know, is a meta film. And meta as in the characters from the original movie, the first one, play themselves. So Heather Langenkamp plays herself. Wes Craven plays himself. You get to see John Saxon and a couple other cameos in there. And obviously Robert Englund. England, I think it's England, not England. I'm not sure. They said England in the movie. It's kind of a weird pronunciation. But obviously they're all playing themselves. And the thing in this one is Heather is kind of starting to have nightmares of Freddy and things like that are creeping in and starting to really affect her. And she has someone that's been calling her and kind of stalking her, so to speak. And it's really creeping her out and things like that. And the Freddy that she's seeing in her dream is definitely scarier and darker, a little bit different looking. So it's freaking her out. So that's the gist. And she ends up talking with Robert, who, is saying how he's seen Freddy as well, and he gets really weird about it. He's seen more than she has, and something's really freaking him out, and he starts acting really strange and won't kind of return her calls, and then him and his wife, I think, just take off, she can't get a hold of him. So weird shit. And then she eventually meets up with Wes Craven, goes over to his house, and he's basically lays the plot out, pretty exposition heavy, but I mean that's what he does. And he kind of tells her that this Freddy that is in this movie, well, it's not really Freddy. It's this old primordial sort of demonic entity that attaches itself to movies, horror movies specifically. And the only way to keep it from releasing it into the real world is to continually make these sort of movies. So she does get a call, and she goes to the New Line headquarters, and she meets with Robert Shea, the producer, who has been in all of these movies as little cameos and actually gets to play himself now. And he's trying to really get her to do the movie, and she doesn't want to do it because she's like, oh, I don't want my kid to see it and stuff like that, and I'm a mom now, I don't want to do that. And they're like, no, kids love horror movies, and trying to get her to do it and everything. And then that actually happens before she meets Wes, and he tells her this craziness. So it's like you kind of put the pieces together that they're really trying to get this movie made because like they think that, you know, this is going to stop this entity from coming out and everything like that. That's the basic plot. It's weird, but it's effective. You know, I didn't really know too much. I had said before, this one was probably actually the first one I watched. A couple years ago, it was just on Netflix, and I wanted a fun horror movie to watch, so I said, oh, Freddy Krueger's cool, and I picked that. And I didn't understand it at all. I got 20 minutes in, 15 minutes in, and I'm like, oh, this is going to like ruin things for me, so I stopped watching it. And yeah, it's a very weird concept, but I think it actually is pretty effective. I don't know if this is the first movie to do this sort of thing, but this movie is definitely like a precursor to Scream, you know, which he directed, Wes directed later on in like 1997, I think, or 96. I'm not sure when that one came out, something around there. I was kind of a little bit worried that it was going to be weird, that they were going to play themselves, like that Heather wasn't going to be Nancy, and it was just going to be too strange, but it actually works really well. Now, obviously, it's a fictionalized thing. Like, she has a husband whose name I can't even remember. Chase Porter, and then she has a son named Dylan, who's played by Miko Hughes, who, if you don't know, is Michelle's friend in Full House, the little bratty, annoying kid. That's her friend in preschool and stuff. So that was something. This movie actually starts with a really cool scene of like Freddy's glove coming to life while they're working on the set and killing two of the stagehand guys that her husband works with, because her husband's a special effects guy. And then she wakes up and realizes it's a dream. That's where it starts, basically. And then her husband later on dies because he's driving home because her son is acting crazy, which he does the whole movie. And Freddy's glove kind of pops out of the thing and kills him and cuts him up. I think it stabs him in the chest or something. Really cool. Yeah. So I'm kind of going all over the place, but I'm just trying to remember my thoughts and everything. This one is obviously a return to form. And coming from Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which is way over the top goofy and totally ridiculous, and I think we would all agree is probably the worst in the series, and a total culmination of that campy, goofy horror comedy with Freddy as the centerpiece and the hero, so to speak. That's the culmination. So coming really just a couple years later, like 3 years later, I think, 94 this came out, 91 I think was Freddy's Dead. A humongous shift in tone. It couldn't be more different. It really goes back to the first movie, and it's closest in tone to the first movie. It's not like, it's got some funny moments in it, of course, but it is totally meant to be a scary horror movie, back to its roots. Obviously, Wes Craven came back to do this one, so it was going to go back to that. So that, of course, I like this one right off the bat because of that style. You know that I did not care for the horror comedy kind of schlocky stuff because of how awesome the first movie was. It was really off-putting to see. So I really enjoyed that aspect of this one. It had a very dark tone, which, you know, not just scary horror, but the darkness, the atmosphere of the movie. That first movie is very dreamlike, is very dark and brooding, and that's what you get in this one. Lots of really good lighting, and that was one thing. I think the cinematography in this one was probably the best in the series. Obviously, it came out a little bit later, 10 years later than the first one, but very dark, very good lighting. Lots of blue lighting, things like that. Very good lighting, very good framing of shots. I was taking note of certain things where, like, you'd see, like, in the beginning, you see Heather talking to her husband, and you just see her face in the mirror talking to him. You don't actually, just tiny little things like that I was taking note of. That I just love those little tiny touches that are put on movies and things like that. Really good atmosphere. Now, I will say, I'll kind of preface this whole thing with this, but I did not like this movie as much as I thought I was going to. I mean, I was reading a lot about the series, and some people were telling me things and saying like, it does go back to the horror route. It's totally different than the others. It's you're gonna really like this one. You're gonna love it. And I even see a lot of people say it's their favorite in the series. And I guess maybe I had just a little bit too high expectations because I was a little bit let down by it. In some aspects, I didn't really love this movie. I loved the first movie. I didn't love this movie. Um, so yeah, we'll talk about that. But I did really enjoy it. I will say that. I didn't think like, oh, this was all right. I really liked it. I just didn't love it, and I do have a lot of issues with it that I'll talk about. I don't want you to think that because I'm gonna harp on these issues that I disliked it. Like I said, I just, I like to be critical sometimes when I talk about these things. Um, let's just talk about some of my um, things I liked. And you might notice I'm not quite as going through the plot as I have in some of the other ones, because there's just a lot that I had to think about this one. I think it a little bit easier for me if I kind of jump all over the place. So I hope that you can that's okay for you guys. But that's how I think I'm going to do this one. Um, things I liked, obviously the tone, like I said, the feel, the fact that it's back to the horror roots. Acting was great for the most part. All the original people. It was a very, very interesting concept, and it had probably the best Freddy I've seen in the whole series. Now, again, Freddy in this movie isn't technically Freddy. It's this demonic entity sort of thing that has attached itself to the Freddy Krueger persona, but it's a very cool design. And it's meant to be different because it's meant to be more demonic. His makeup is totally different. It's no longer the burnt, mottled sort of pinkish, brownish flesh. He's got these open muscles that you can see, these dark red, burgundy sort of muscles. They're around the eyes, so it almost makes it look like he has eyeshadow kind of muscles, if that makes sense. Um, he has like these green, yellowish contacts in, which is great. He now wears like a green fedora. His sweater is reversed, so it's actually like an olive green sweater with red stripes, versus red and green. The claw is totally different. So the claw is this bony, more organic looking sort of claw. And he wears this kind of grayish, blackish, bluish, I don't know how to describe it quite, trench coat. I thought that his design was excellent in this. And I think it was probably one of the scariest Freddys in the entire series. I do have some issues with that we'll talk about, but there were some shots where he, like, when he ripped out of the bed sheets and kind of looked at the camera in the darkness with the lighting, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a great shot. Really dark and creepy. And his voice was a little less deep than it was in the other movies. It was like they let Robert's true voice come through a little bit more, which I liked, because I think I had talked about that in some alternate takes for the first one where they didn't have that voice filter on Robert. I thought he was awesome just on his own. So that's a little bit lessened here. An excellent portrayal of Freddy. Some of the gore in this, and this one I didn't think this was as gory as the others. I didn't think it was as violent, but it was visceral, just like the first one. It had very few kills in this one, but they were good. They were good kills. Yeah, it was good. And the meta aspect, I actually really enjoyed. Now, there's a couple meta aspects going on here. I saw it as there were three. The first meta aspect is the obvious one that we all know, the plot, where they're playing themselves. Interesting, and I thought it was pretty effective. The second one is the fact that the movie that Wes has been writing, he's been having these dreams and he's been writing this secretive script, is what's taking place. So when Heather comes in to talk to Wes at his house, the script that he has on his computer, the conversation they're having is right there on the computer, everything they're saying. Later on, when she ends up going down into Freddy's kind of dream world, she finds the script and it has everything that's happening. And then at the end of the movie, when she comes out, she has the script in which Wes kind of writes, "Thank you, Heather, for playing Nancy one last time," and it has everything that happened on it. So that kind of meta aspect as well. Then we have the other meta aspect that's not quite as obvious, although there are some pretty on the nose things where he, it's all, this movie is, I think, firstly a commentary on movies in general, and second, a horror film. There are a lot of references to horror films. You can tell that was what Wes was trying to go for. I mean, there are tons and tons of references. Like the very fact that, the whole point of the movie is that they need to make one more movie in order to, stop this entity from coming out and taking over. And there's so many different ways you could take this. It's very subjective, I think, but the way that I took some of them, probably one of the, I don't know if it was probably meant to be funny, a tongue-in-cheek thing where she's like, you just have to she's like, well, how do we stop it? And he goes, oh, you just have to make another movie, kind of like, oh, just do it. Just keep making these, like tongue-in-cheek, but, it serves the plot. And I thought that was kind of the point, was that he was trying to almost, like, oh, just one more, like how when she goes to talk to Robert Shea, how he's like, oh, we want to make the ultimate one, we want to make the ultimate Nightmare on Elm Street movie. It's like, I think that was Wes trying to say, like, how they'll just keep doing it, oh no, well, don't worry, in this next one it'll be the final one, the ultimate one, and we'll solve all the problems this time, which they kind of kept doing throughout the series. I think that was what he was trying to say. The fact that she had to play Nancy one last time was a reference to the audience and everything like that, them getting to do this one last time. I thought that was basically what he was trying to go for. And some of the things that I didn't like, that I found almost unintentionally funny, I was unsure if they were just qualms with the story and script I had, or if they were meta references. Like, obviously, there was the very obvious one when she opens her closet and Fred kind of comes out of the closet, looks right at the camera and says, "Did you miss me?" Now he's talking to her, but he's really talking to the audience. I thought, like, did you miss Freddy Krueger? That one's really obvious, but he did certain things, and I thought this was the scariest and the most menacing portrayal of Freddy yet, but he did some unintentionally funny things, I think. Like, some of his lines. He had these little quips. He would be this super scary, menacing person, and he had all these little quips, like when he was in the hospital with her son and he kills the babysitter. He's like, whose name was Julie, I think. He's like, what was the little kid's name? Dylan. He's like, hey, Dylan, you ever play Skin the Cat? It's like these little quips. I think he was trying, and he had a lot of those, I noticed. And I was kind of scratching my head in this when I was first watching it. Like, if he's trying to be really scary, why is he saying these goofy things? It almost takes away from the character. And then I'm like, was that Wes Craven's intention? Like, was that his intention to, kind of say, like, you have this scary character and you have him say something goofy, it kind of takes away from it. Do you see how ridiculous that is? Like a commentary almost on the past movies and how ridiculous it was getting. That's how I took it. I could be wrong. It could have just been goofy. It could have just been fan servicey. I don't know, but that's what I took it as. Another instance, which I don't think was intentional, but who knows, was in the finale when they go down to Freddy's dream and they're in his like Colosseum labyrinthian hellscape sort of thing. How he opens his mouth super wide to eat her son, and it's like really weird, like cheesy looking robotic sort of effects, and his tongue shoots out like Laffy Taffy around Heather. I'm like, this looks really goofy. It's like really looking goofy and kind of taking away from me. And I'm like, was that intentional too? Like, was he trying to show how goofy some of this shit looked? Like, you got this scary ass menacing character trying to kill a child, and look how stupid it is. Look how this is ruined by these goofy things that are happening. I don't know if that one was intentional, but I definitely thought that took away from it. And that was another thing. The ending of this movie I wasn't the biggest fan of. I did think the set piece of his Freddy's lair, this like twisted sort of hell version of hell, of this like boiler room that's like a coliseum with like all this like vines and pools of water, and I thought that was really cool to look at. I thought that was a great set piece, but I didn't care for the ending. I just thought it was weird. When they burn him, the the demon comes out. You see this demon for a minute. His eyes like explode, and that looked cool for a second. And then it went into this like wicked goofy like imposed fire effect sort of thing. And that was another thing where I was like, is that a nod to the 3D effect that they used in the last movie, like looking really bad? I don't know. I'm like, but would he really try to ruin the end of the movie with something like that? I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. Those were some of the things. Is like I really enjoyed the meta aspect of this movie and all these little nods and things like that. But some things I was really unsure of, and it was really not. I just couldn't gather if it was supposed to be a reference to something or it was just looking goofy. One that's for sure was the incredibly overbearing doctor, because her son is like freaking out and everything, and like kind of trying to be Freddy, like he's putting knives on his hands and like saying all this creepy shit. And she takes him to this clinic. John Saxon actually recommends that they go to like a therapist or something, and the woman that's her son's doctor is like super overbearing, and like many times in the movie is like very concerned that she let him watch her movies, and that's why he's acting the way it is. And it's like she's like, no, I don't let him watch those movies. Obviously that's a reference to like that, particularly in that time period. That was when like censorship was getting really big, and like parents and like they had like the groups of moms that were like trying to like ban all these movies and stuff, and saying like, oh, my kid's like a killer now because he watched this one movie. That, I think that was obviously what that was trying to refer to. 1 second, please. Needed a sip of water. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts. There were some cool things. How like at the end of the movie, when Dylan escapes from the mental institution because he can sleepwalk, he runs across the road and Freddy's like dangling him kind of like a puppet. I thought that was a little bit of a reference to the third movie. That was kind of goofy. The effect was not good. But then you look across the highway and you see this army of Freddy's. I thought that little shot made up for it because that was kind of a cool thing to see. And then when she gets back and she finds John Saxon, he like randomly turns into her father from the first movie, and it's like they're starting to like morph together and everything like that. And her calling him dad, that lets Freddy kind of come into the real world kind of thing. It starts to get like a little muddled. Like the rules are different here, and they're not as clear as the first one because this isn't Freddy Krueger. This is some other sort of demon. But I don't know. I thought that was kind of interesting, and I did like how her kid left the sleeping pills for her, because she would read him Hansel and Gretel and leaving the breadcrumbs, and so she found the trail of pills, and she goes into his bed under the sheets, and it's like this big tunnel of sheets, and she flies down into Freddy's lair. I thought that was a cool effect. I'm a sucker. A lot of blue lighting in this movie. I mentioned that, but it was used a lot. I'm not sure what the blue signified, but I really thought it looked very cool. Very good effect. So, I'm trying to think of what else. There weren't a lot of kills in this movie, I didn't think. I mean, there were about as many kills as the first one, so if that... yeah, I think there were about as many as the first one. The two guys die in the beginning, although it's kind of in a dream, but they end up being dead in real life. Her husband dies. The one girl gets killed. Julie, the babysitter, gets killed in the clinic. A la the first movie where she gets thrown onto the ceiling and is, ripped around, and then she snaps her back and she flies onto the ground. That was a nod to the first one. That was cool. That was it, really. It wasn't as extreme as some of the others. There wasn't as much blood and gore, but it was pretty visceral. I was okay with it. I thought it was good. So, trying to think of some other things I could say that were really notable to me, because I know I'm missing some stuff, but I'm just trying to think of the things that I really was really looking at a lot. I think really that's it. I did like it. I liked this movie. I liked the atmosphere, like I said, and everything, and it was enjoyable. It had that creepy, dark style that I like. I liked the meta aspects, especially because they're things that are subjective and we can talk about and argue about and stuff like that. And they're things that aren't going to leave my mind for a while. I liked that fact that I can think about this stuff for a long time, which is not something I've had the pleasure of with a lot of the other Elm Street movies where I watch them and I'm kind of like, okay, all right, that was kind of fun, or that was bad, or whatever. I'm kind of done with it. This one I'm going to be thinking about for a while. So I'm looking forward to watching this one again eventually to get another take on it. This is going to be the kind of movie where I continually find new little things about it. But it wasn't the greatest. I wasn't like blown away by it. The ending was a letdown for me, kind of. I get it. I understand. I do get that it's not meant to be a straight up slasher movie. It's kind of a commentary on films. I get that. I totally get it. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't a little unsatisfied at points. You know, it had such a good style and it had a good setting for this to be a great slasher movie, and it didn't take advantage of that because it went its own route. And maybe that was the point. Like he wanted you to be like, he didn't want it to be like that, of course. You know, he wanted to set all that atmosphere up and then do this other thing. I get that. I understand that. I just kind of prefer if it was more of a generic slasher. I know doesn't that sound terrible? And I think that was the point. Like, you want this to be a rinse and repeat kind of movie in a way, and it doesn't end up being that. So maybe that's the point, but whatever. Yeah, I'm trying to think of if there's any other things that I liked. The music was great. The music was by J. Peter Robinson, who I have no clue who he is. I've never heard of him. He is a British film composer. I don't know anything about him. Never heard of him before, but it was very good. It was orchestral, but had some amazing cues in it. Really, really good cues in it. And when it would start to get cerebral and like get fuzzy, if she was in the original movie sort of, or if she was in real life, they'd play the original synth cues to let you know. I thought that was a really great touch. Oh, you know what? Actually, it says he's done Wayne's World, which that's funny. And he did The Blob from 1988. That one's awesome. If you guys haven't seen The Blob, the remake from 1988, that movie is disgusting. That's a good one. Cool. I'll have to do that one too at some point. Yeah, that was New Nightmare. Basically, that's how I felt about it. What did you guys think about this one? I know a lot of people love this. A lot of people like this movie. I liked it too, like I said. It was very, very interesting film. If I could have one more critique with it as well, it was paced a little slow. It was the longest one. It was almost 2 hours long, actually. It was just under 2 hours. So that's pretty long for a horror movie, considering most of these are about 90 minutes. And, you know, I had said this in my Letterboxd review, actually. I consider a slow burn movie and a slow pace two different things, really. Slow burn, to me, is when the plot is building consistently towards something, and they're always giving you little things to look forward to this really big climactic sort of thing. That's, to me, it's a little bit different than pace, where pace is the overall flow of the movie. This one was like kind of a mix of both almost, where, you know, it starts off right off the gate with 2 kills, and you know, they knew you wanted to see something visceral like that. And then, of course, you know, you get little things here and there, but it really did feel to me like a little bit of a slow pace. There were large chunks where it was just trying to build the plot and stuff, which was okay, but it felt a little bit slow paced to me. It felt like it could have used some tightening up of the pace, and honestly, it could have. You know, I like long movies. Like, my favorite movie is Dances with Wolves, which is 4 hours long. But I felt like they could have cut a little bit of this one, actually. I know that's crazy because I'm always saying, like, no, add more in. I want more and more and more. But in terms of just this particular edit, like, it was a little slow. And it did have a little bit of that slow burn where you're constantly working towards seeing Freddy and getting him out in the real world. And then it's like, the problem with these kind of slow burn things is, you know, you're building towards this big reveal or this big moment, and you know it as the viewer. You know that the movie plays with your emotions and tension in order to get you to just keep waiting for that. And the problem is, if you don't like that climax, then it's like you just waited for kind of nothing. And that was kind of the problem I had here, where like you're really waiting for this big final fight, right, with Heather versus Freddy. I didn't love it. I didn't love that whole sequence. I thought it was like, it was cool. Like they could have done more with that. It was a little short too. So whatever, but whatever. This one actually made the least amount of money of all of the movies, which I thought was crazy because I was like, this is probably the second best one in the series. Or, I really did like 2. Now that I've seen them, I think I would say my favorite is the first one, and then probably this one second, and then the second movie would be my third favorite. I know a lot of people don't like the third movie, but I've talked in depth about that. I really actually enjoyed the second movie a lot. Mostly because of Mark Patton's performance, I thought was really good, and that really tied the movie together for me. But this one didn't it made the least amount of money. It's just like, really? This made less money than like Freddy's Dead? You serious? I don't know. It's like this kind of thing I have sometimes, and this isn't quite a case of that, but I'm kind of going on a tangent. I always have this thing where it's like the worse a movie is, the more popular it is. Like the more status quo and like Hollywood like paint by numbers it is, the more people like it. I'm sure that that's not an unusual opinion to have, but I kind of feel like that sometimes. Yeah, I want to say more about this, but as of right now, I really don't. That was basically my thoughts about it. It was a really interesting movie to watch. It was a hell of a lot better than a lot of the previous ones, and it was a great way to end the series. Which it basically ends the series. Obviously, like I said, we have Freddy versus Jason, but that's kind of something different. So I think like this being the last movie in the series, I think that's fine. I didn't love it, and I had some issues with it, but I think it was like a fine send-off. I think it was done really well. It was a very tastefully made movie. But no surprises, though. Wes Craven is a great director and writer. Unfortunately, he's gone now. We won't get anything new from him. Yeah. Also, he did Scream. We all know that. He did Scream 4. I didn't know that because Scream 4 was bad. I don't know if you folks have seen that one. That Scream 4 was not good. It was a really bad generic slasher. I did not like that. So I was actually surprised to learn that he did that one. I guess he did all of them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I was like, really, Wes? That one was not good, man. And I know they're doing Scream 5 now, which is coming out tentatively in 2022. We'll see about that. Hopefully they can bring it back. And there is that MTV series, which is kind of not good. But, yeah, Scream will be another fun one to do. So what am I going to do next? I don't know. I did my little Witches piece. I'm done with that shit forever. Witches the original. I could do that. And Unsolved Mysteries, too. Remember I said that I'm going to do Season 2 for you. If you like Unsolved Mysteries and you're curious about the Netflix reboot that they've done, I did a podcast reviewing the first season of that. And I said that I'm getting my way through the second season to review that as well. I've watched a couple episodes. I'll give you a little spoiler on that one. It's not as good as the first one so far. And the first one was like barely keeping my interest, so to speak. There was like a couple really interesting episodes, but you all know probably by this point, it's not like Unsolved Mysteries at all. It's only Unsolved Mysteries in name. It is really a Dateline show. It's just another generic true crime show. So it has to have really good stories to keep my interest, because they're kind of, to be honest, kind of shitting on the legacy of Unsolved Mysteries. And this new season, I've watched 2 episodes and they were like okay. They were passable. Like I wasn't wanting to turn them off, but they weren't as good or as gripping as the first season so far. So hopefully that it can redeem itself kind of, but I'm like, I was like not expecting that they were going to change anything, because why would they? Like, I was kind of hoping they would at least try to get some more interesting, scary stories in there. And so far, not really. Not at all. Even less scary or creepy or chilling. So, who knows? Halloween is soon. Are you guys excited? I'm very excited. My friend's coming over, and we're all going to do this cool... We're going to do a triple feature. We're going to watch The Witches, the original. We're going to watch Return to Oz. And we're going to watch Hocus Pocus. I have not seen Return to Oz still. I've seen a lot of clips from it, and I've listened to the music like 8,000 times, but haven't seen it yet. That's going to be fun. A little triple feature. So, yeah, let me you guys know what you're going to do on Halloween, what you're going to if you're going to watch a movie or something. I'll probably watch Halloween as well, the original, like during the day. I always do. That's like my Halloween. I have to make time for that every year to watch that. Even if it's like I wake up and I'm watching it, kind of it's on in the background when I'm like have my coffee or something. I have to have that one playing at some point. You know, we'll see. We'll see what Halloween's like with COVID and everything this year. You know, like I know there's like some places are banning it and some places have very strict when the kids can come out and trick or treat and everything. I don't really hand out candy. I do like a little bit. Sometimes I do, but I don't like kids either, really. But I always like seeing kids walk around in Halloween costumes. It just reminds me, you know, of that fun time when you're a kid. So anyways, that's New Nightmare. Let me know what your thoughts are. I hope you enjoyed this little series on the Elm Street series and my thoughts on them. Like I said, I'm not done with this. This is just because I finished. I'm not done. I'm going to just keep going. You know, maybe once or twice a week. I think once is probably good. And I don't know what I'll do next quite, but I will just keep this podcast going because it's a lot of fun for me. Everybody take care and stay scared and have a great day. Peace out.